Okay, good morning. We are in Daniel chapter 5 today. So, last week we learned that Nebuchadnezzar became an ox and ate grass for a while during his reign, all because of his pride. Because of his pride and arrogance. And until he acknowledged who's really in charge, God let him live like an animal for a while. So here we get to chapter 5, and we have a new king. So I'm going to begin studying, reading, chapter 5, verse 1. I'm going to read through verse 4. King Belshazzar gave a great banquet for 1,000 of his nobles and drank wine with them. While Belshazzar was drinking his wine, he gave orders to bring in the gold and silver goblets that Nebuchadnezzar his father had taken from the temple in Jerusalem, so that the king and his nobles, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. So they brought in the gold goblets that had been taken from the temple of God in Jerusalem, and the king and his nobles, his wives, and his concubines drank from them. As they drank the wine, they praised the gods of gold, silver, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone. All right, so historians for years have denied the existence of Belshazzar. They say there's two things wrong with these first couple of verses, and one of them is King Belshazzar wasn't the king. Daniel got it wrong, and because of these problems, they kind of deem the book of Daniel as unreliable, okay? The other thing that they say is not only was he not a king, King Belshazzar was not a king, but he was also not the son of Nebuchadnezzar, okay? Well, then as time goes on, you begin to uncover more information. There was a writer that was 400 years before Christ. His name was Herodotus, and he wrote indicating that how do you say this guy's name? Nabonidus was actually the king. I'm probably butchering that, by the way. That he was actually king, and so that's kind of what caused the problems to begin with. They're like, well, this guy's supposed to be king according to this historian that wrote, and now Daniel's saying that King Belshazzar is. Well, then the archaeologists started uncovering stuff, They uncovered some tablets inscribed by King Nabonidus, or whatever, what he is. And the inscription on it tells us that he left his oldest son in charge while he went off on a campaign. And when he got back, he thought, the guy's doing okay. So he retired. He went off to a place called Tema and retired and lived and left his kingdom, or at least Babylon, with his son. And in other inscriptions, it tells us who that son is, and that son is Belshazzar. So Daniel was very, very he was correct on that. So the other thing is they accused him of is Daniel says he's the son of Nebuchadnezzar. Well, that's easily explained to the Jewish mind. When you refer to Jesus, he was the son of, who did they refer to Jesus? He's the David. Was he legitimately the son of David? No, he was a descendant or heir. Well, the same thing is true of Belshazzar. He is a descendant or heir of Nebuchadnezzar, not the direct son. So that's easily explained to the Jewish mind, and historians are really nitpicking over this because that's easy. So anyway, what's going on here on this very night is Belshazzar has decided, I'm going to give a banquet for 1,000 of my nobles and all my wives and concubines, and everybody's going to come together. And what do you do when you have a party? What do you do when you have a party? You drink. I dare say that the Phillies last night were having a big party. I didn't want to bring it up, but maybe the Astros need to be on the board today because it was excruciating, and I was like, I can't watch this anymore. But I tell you, they were having a party, and I'm sure there was some drinking going on. And if we were having a party in the Astros Stadium, I'm sure there was drinking going on. Well, there's drinking going on, a lot of drinking, and they're known for their parties and everything. And he's invited, he's got women there, he's got, I don't understand the wives and the concubines being there together, but they're a lot, everybody's there, and they're having a party, but something else is going on at this time too. somebody's outside knocking on the door really, really quietly. Because that very night, Cyrus is coming, and he's going to take Babylon. All right, so perhaps he chose this particular night when everybody was going to be busy drinking. You know, who knows? But he is there.
They didn't have their swords on.
Yeah, that's right, that's right. So I want to look with me over at Isaiah 44. I didn't write this on the board, but I want you to look at Isaiah 44 real quick. You know, God doesn't try to keep things secret. And in Isaiah, he told him, not only is Babylon going to fall, but I'm going to tell you who's going to do it. And he names the person. Okay, so in chapter 44, verse 28, well, if you look at 24, there's a little subtitle there. Jerusalem to be inhabited. Is that right? Inhabited, yeah. That means they're going back. They're going back to Jerusalem at some point.
Yes.
But if you look down at verse 28, he says, who says of Cyrus, he is my shepherd and will accomplish all that I please. He will say of Jerusalem, let it be rebuilt, and of the temple, let its foundations be laid. If you look at the beginning of 45, this is what the Lord says to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I take hold of, to subdue nations before him and to strip kings of their armor. He specifically says Cyrus is going to be involved in the Jews getting to go home to Jerusalem. And he says that in Isaiah. Jeremiah also alludes to this. I think he names it too. I think he names Cyrus also. So anyway, I want you to know it has been predicted that this is going to happen. So the king gets together. And what does he decide to do? He remembers something. Oh, there's these goblets that are in the temple of our God, and they came from Jerusalem, and they're really nice. Let's go get them. So they go in there, they get the goblets, and they bring them in there, and they fill them with alcohol, and they begin to drink. But that's just the beginning of it. What else do they decide to do at the same time but worship other gods while they're doing, or give credit to other gods, the gods of gold and silver.
Yeah, they can't see or hear or taste.
Right, that's exactly right. It was an insult to God to begin with that these vessels were ever taken from the temple and put in the temple of another god. But to take them and put alcohol in them and then praise creation rather than the creator. This was affronting to God. This was very foolish. Belshazzar, and I'm thinking to me, would Nebuchadnezzar have ever done that? Knowing what Nebuchadnezzar knows about Jehovah at this point, I don't think he ever would want to affront Daniel's God in any way. I don't think he would ever dream about going in there and taking those and doing what Belshazzar is doing. I'm reading into this, but yeah, that's what I'm thinking. You know, I don't think I'm going to do that. But all right, so let's.
No, because he turned me into an animal.
That's right. Oh, there's no telling what he's going to turn me into next time.
Yeah.
So you know, here now we have what would be a grandson probably of Nebuchadnezzar. And he's doing something that I don't think Nebuchadnezzar would have ever done. So let's begin reading in verse 5. Suddenly, the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall near the lampstand in the royal palace. The king watched the hand as it wrote. His face turned pale, and he was so frightened that his knees knocked together and his legs gave way. The king called out for the enchanters, the astrologers, and the diviners to be brought, and said to these wise men of Babylon, whoever reads this writing and tells me what it means will be clothed in purple and have a gold chain placed around his neck, and he will be made the third highest ruler in the kingdom. Then all the king's wise men came in, but they could not read the writing or tell the king what it meant. So King Belshazzar became even more terrified, and his face grew more pale, and his nobles were baffled. Okay, so again, I'm so grateful that we have so many historical records to back things up. But we have one that specifically describes this room, okay? The Great Hall was measured 50 feet by 160 feet. It was illuminated by a great candelabra in the middle. The walls of this hall were covered with white plaster, white I think of stucco when I think of plaster, but some kind of a white plaster. The reference to white plaster is intriguing because the Aramaic word translated plaster means chalk, and it is white. It is white, so the walls are white. They're great for writing on, don't you think? You're really going to be able to see what's written on this white plastered wall. So, what appears are the fingers of a hand, and they begin to write a mysterious message. I get the impression that these fingers are fairly close to the king, because he's able to read this, and he turns pale. There's only 2 times that I turn pale. One is right before I get really sick, and the other is right before I pass out. Okay, so when it says he's pale, and then it says that his knees begin to shake together and his legs gave way, I'm like, he's about to pass out. He needs to sit down, okay? So what was fun, having lots of amusement and fun, is now, this is shocking. This is terrifying, you know. This is our ghost story of the week, you know. This is it. So what to do now? Well, he does what Nebuchadnezzar did every single time. He calls the same old guys in there to ask them what's going on, you know. And it makes you wonder, well, what language was this written in? I don't necessarily think it has to be a language. All we need to know is God knows what it says, and he's going to let Daniel in on it. But nobody else knows what this says or can read it. So who knows? It's unknown to everyone except God, and it will remain a hidden language until God decided to reveal it to someone. What does Belshazzar promise? What are you going to get if you're able to tell me? What is it? Third highest position. Why didn't he say second highest position? You know, because he knows Daddy's really the king, and I'm the second highest. He can't have my position. So there's the third highest. It fits in beautifully. Third highest position. But what else was he going to be given? Change clothes, purple. Purple's good. I like purple. And gold chains. I'm going to give you some jewelry. All of that's royalty. You know, you're going to be treated like royalty, emblems of wealth, importance, rank, you know. He says, yeah, I'm going to give you all of these things. Then the diviners and the enchanters and the astrologers, they can't do it. They don't know what it says. And again, I think they're afraid if I tell the king the wrong answer, I'm in trouble. So we don't know. We don't know what it is. So it makes me think the king has no idea who Daniel is. Where's Daniel at? Why wasn't he called in, you know? I think that he's keeping a low profile these days. And kind of staying out of the public eye. It's been really quiet. He hasn't obviously been needed until now. And so I don't think this king knows who he is. And so let's see what happens. He's sick. Nobody can help him. Look in verse 10. The queen, hearing the voices of the king and his nobles, came into the banquet hall. "O king, live forever," she said. "Don't be alarmed, and don't look so pale. There is a man in your kingdom who has the spirit of the holy gods in him. In the time of your father, he has found to have insight and intelligence and wisdom like that of the gods. King Nebuchadnezzar, your father the king, I say, appointed him chief of the magicians, the enchanters, the astrologers, and the diviners. This man Daniel, whom the king called Belteshazzar, was found to have a keen mind and knowledge and understanding, and also the ability to interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve difficult problems. Call for Daniel, and he will tell you what the writing means." I'm going to keep going. So Daniel was brought before the king, and the king said to him, "Are you Daniel, one of the exiles my father the king brought from Judah? I have heard that the spirit of the gods is in you, and that you have insights, intelligence, and outstanding wisdom. The wise men and enchanters were brought before me to read this writing and tell me what it means, but they could not explain it. Now I have heard that you are able to give interpretations and to solve difficult problems. If you can read this writing and tell me what it means, you will be clothed in purple and have a gold chain placed around your neck, and you will be made the third highest ruler in the kingdom." Then Daniel answered the king, You may keep your gifts for yourself, and give yourself give your rewards to someone else. Nevertheless, I will read the writing for the king and tell him what it means. I don't think he has any hesitation telling this king what it means. I'm not agonizing over this, king. I'm ready to tell you right off here. And you know what? You can keep whatever you have because I don't want it. I don't think he's being rude. I think he's being bold. Bold with this statement. But here's this woman. Here she comes in. We got to go back to her. Who is this woman? It says she's the queen. We know from Esther being who she was to the king. Could she just go anytime she wanted to and talk to him? No. So how is it that this woman enters the banquet hall, obviously not invited to this, she wasn't an invite to this, that she gets to come in there and tell him what for?
Just take over.
Yeah, just take over. So I think that this is either his mother or his grandmother, and those are the only two people that can get away with that, because she comes in there, she invites herself in, and apparently there's a lot of commotion going on in there because of what has occurred. So she comes on in there, but notice how she does give a typical greeting, how she greets him. You know, she says, where is it? What does she say? Yeah, she's right. Oh, king, live forever. By the way, don't kill me for coming in here to see you. And then she tells him, you know, don't be alarmed and don't look so pale. I just think this is like a mother. This is what a mother would say. You're going to be okay. Stop acting like a baby. Come on, this kind of thing. So this is the way she talks. And she says, well, by the way, there is somebody that can do what you want. So she either knows Daniel. Yeah.
So she had to be there before him to know Daniel.
She did. That's
So
exactly
it had to
right.
be
That's
when
exactly
they're
right. She's got knowledge of him. She either knows him personally or knew what occurred personally, or she had heard about it in her past.
Yeah.
And so she knew, because look at what all she says about Daniel. Yeah, she's like, oh, I'm going to start talking about Daniel. And I'm familiar with him, and I'm familiar with his deeds. And the information that she shares is, if you want the best, you better call him. But if you want a guess, or a I think, or a maybe, or even a possibility, you could use these other guys. But if you want the best of the best, you need Daniel in here. Basically, that's what she says. If you seek the truth, there's only one God to send for. Send for a man with God's words behind him. Wow, that's nice. That's nice. So here in comes Daniel. And notice the king is trying, I think, to get an idea of who Daniel is. He's like, aren't you one of those guys that my dad brought over from Judah? Yeah, I think I am. Okay, and so then he just flat out asking, can you do this or not? Can you read? Can you read this? And then he backs up that same question with the same gifts. You know, I'm going to offer you what I've offered to these other guys, third in the kingdom, purple and all of this. And you think about Daniel for a minute. Of all the people in that room right there, there is nobody that deserved to be clothed in purple more than Daniel. He is a son of a king. He is. He belonged in purple. Belshazzar has no business wearing purple. Absolutely not. He lacked all the marks of true royalty, and he has no right to offer gifts to Daniel because they're not his to begin with. They belong to somebody else.
You would think that what had happened back in the oven, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Nebuchadnezzar's dream and all that they would have turned a tiny bit.
Well, I've always...
But they don't, it doesn't seem to faze them. But
Okay.
we see that very much today.
Yes.
We see that very much today. I mean, we have this, and we have so much evidence of God's presence in our lives, but people don't listen and don't turn to it.
Right. They may, when something bad happens and then something good follows it or whatever, they may for a small period of time believe or have faith or try to be active in their spiritual self, you know, try to do something spiritual. But it doesn't last very long, does it? It doesn't last. You would think, and like I said last week, I really think King Nebuchadnezzar probably and could have had a change of heart, or at least he had deep respect for the God of Daniel. But this guy, nah, he doesn't have respect for him. And Daniel, like I said, his response to these gifts is, you can keep them. Because he knows what the writing says. Tonight it's all over. It is not going to matter whether I'm clothed in purple or not. And and maybe tonight I don't want to be clothed in purple. I'm just a Jew over here minding my own business. I don't need these gifts. Nevertheless, even though he turns down the gifts, he says, yeah, I will tell you what it says. I'm going to tell you. And so it is lesson time for Belshazzar, and God will use his instrument to deliver the message. Let's look in verse 18. O King, the Most High God gave your father Nebuchadnezzar sovereignty and greatness and glory and splendor. He is going to give Belshazzar a little history lesson. A short little history lesson all about Nebuchadnezzar, your grandfather. Because, verse 19, because of the high position that he gave him, all the peoples and nations and men of every language dreaded and feared him. Those the king wanted to put to death, he put to death. Those he wanted to spare, he spared. Those he wanted to promote, he promoted. And those he wanted to humble, he humbled. But when his heart became arrogant and hardened with pride, he was disposed from his royal throne and stripped of his glory. He was driven away from people and given the mind of an animal. He lived with the wild donkeys, and he ate grass like cattle, and his body was drenched with the dew of heaven, until he acknowledged that the Most High God is sovereign over the kingdoms of men and sets over them anyone that he wishes. But you, his son, O Belshazzar, have not humbled yourself, though you knew all of this. Instead, you have set yourself up against the Lord of heaven. You have the goblets from his temple brought to you, and you and your nobles, your wives, and your concubines drank wine from them. You praise the gods of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which cannot see or hear or understand. But you did not honor the God who holds in his hand your life and all your ways. So I'm going to stop right there. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Daniel begins by going all the way back to the reign of Nebuchadnezzar. And the first verse is really the point that Daniel has to make, is that the Most High God gave your father Nebuchadnezzar sovereignty and greatness and glory and splendor. That's verse 18. That is the main thrust of everything that Daniel says. The reason he was powerful is because God made it so. Now, because of his power, the nations bow to Nebuchadnezzar. The earth fears Nebuchadnezzar. And it goes into all this. If you're favored, that's great. That's wonderful. But if you're not, you're in trouble. Because if you displease him, he would have you removed from your position. But something in Nebuchadnezzar changed. He became too proud of himself and in his sickness he was driven out and lived like a wild animal. And Daniel tells Belshazzar it was his pride and arrogance that caused his downfall. Now I'm wondering if Belshazzar has the same problem. Do you have a problem with pride and arrogance because you're in trouble if you do, kind of thing? Your father Nebuchadnezzar wasn't restored until he acknowledged that the Most High God is over the kingdoms of men. Quick little history lesson. Then Daniel moves on to Belshazzar. But you, his son, O Belshazzar, you have repeated the very same thing. You are not humble. You are full of pride for yourself. You should have learned a lesson because you knew about these events. Daniel says you knew about this. You should have been careful. You think about nations. We study history and we know what we've done in the past and the things that we've done in the past that are wrong. But yet, for some reason, we make the same mistakes over and over and over again. We find ourselves in the same problems. And as a person, am I any different? It's hard not to make the same mistakes. It's almost, you got to be on top of your game all the time not to make the same mistakes again and again and again. There's a scripture in James that says, anyone that knows the good he ought to do and doesn't do it sins of omission. And I think, there's a lot of good to be done. and we know what it is, and yet we don't always do it. Well, that's also a mistake that we make over and over and over again, kind of thing. So, verse 23 is chilling because Daniel basically tells, you haven't put yourself up against another nation or another person or anybody else. You've put yourself up. You are challenging God himself. You are challenging him. You have set yourself up against the Lord of heaven. Wow. Do you dare to challenge Jehovah God? It's not like this kind of thing has never happened, but it has something to do with those articles of the temple, because Daniel, not knowing what they had done, says, you went in and you took those articles, you took those goblets, and you drank from them, you put alcohol in them, and you drank from them, and then you went ahead and was disrespectful in a pagan way to Jehovah by worshiping another god. Idolatry. Booze and idolatry. That's what you just did. And then I like the part where he reminds Belshazzar, these guys can't hear, they do nothing, they can't see, they do absolutely, they can't understand, kind of thing. And he says, you have offended the God of heaven. Belshazzar owes his very life, his every breath to God. He has the position he has because of God himself. He has humiliated God. So now I'm going to tell you what he wrote on the roll. So let's look at verse 25. This is the inscription that was written. Mene, mene, tekel, parsin. And this is what these words mean. Mene, God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. And then it says Peres or Parsin. Your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Then at Belshazzar's command, Daniel was clothed in purple, a gold chain was placed around his neck, and he was proclaimed the third highest ruler in the kingdom. That very night, Belshazzar, king of the Babylonians, was slain, and Darius the Mede took over the kingdom at the age of 62. All right, so let's talk about Mene, mene, tekel, parsin. Okay. He gives the reading to the king, and the word mene means, it's got several meanings actually. As a verb, it means numbered. You've been numbered. As a, trying to remember what it said in here. As a noun, it means 50 shekels. Mene means 50 shekels. So, as a noun, it's going to be about money, but money is also weighed. So, numbered. Why does he say it twice? Maybe for emphasis. You've been numbered. You've numbered kind of thing. So God has fixed. Daniel will interpret these words, and he says that it is God that has numbered the days of Belshazzar's reign and has brought it to an end. God has fixed the limit of your reign. So tekel has to do with weight or to weigh something. As a noun, tekel means a shekel. So we've got 50 shekels and a shekel. 50 shekels, a shekel. Numbered, let's weigh you out and see how it is. Daniel interprets this as Belshazzar has been weighted on the scales and he has been found wanting. In a similar fashion, the word weighted can be used in respect to determining someone's character. The measure of Belshazzar's character was observed by God, and guess what? It just doesn't measure up. It just doesn't measure up. Belshazzar has been placed in God's balancing scale. He has been weighed and tested to see if he comes up to God's standards, and he does not. And then the last word, which is parsin. Parsin as a verb means to divide. Parsin as a noun means a half a shekel. The 1 shekel is divided. Half a shekel. So, according to Daniel, Belshazzar did not test well against God's standard, and now his kingdom will be divided. He doesn't just tell him that it's going to happen, he reveals who's going to take it. The Medes and the Persians. All right. So what Belshazzar doesn't know is that the Medes and the Persians are approaching his gate. I drew this little scale on here because it was in the sunset thing, and I was expecting it to say God on one side somewhere, but no. They have Babylon over here. King Belshazzar, you have been weighed in the balances, and you have been found lacking because you did not live up to the kingdom that God put you over. The kingdom, the whole entire kingdom is better than you are. Okay? You're up here. You don't measure out appropriately. So, the Medes and Persians are approaching the gate. It will all be over by morning. Belshazzar had promised Daniel the third highest rule of the kingdom, which he gave him, and it wasn't his to give. That can only be given by God, and he really doesn't want it anyway at this point. I wouldn't want to be third highest ruler of the kingdom knowing it's going to be taken before morning. Okay, so what caused the downfall of Babylon? It was probably multiple things, but this God-dishonoring performance of Belshazzar rang down as the closing curtain of Babylon. He was slain, and he was ushered into the night to meet the one that he had defied. He's going to meet God, Jehovah God, that night. I want to talk just a little bit about the Medes and the Persians. The book of Daniel says that Darius the Mede took over the kingdom. But Lonnie says, no, it was Cyrus that took Babylon. Of course, Isaiah says Cyrus. Under the authority of Darius the Mede. Darius would have been Cyrus's uncle. Cyrus was the general. Cyrus came in and took Babylon. He did, but it is Darius the Mede that rules everything. The land all belongs to him. He had advanced against Babylon. This is history. He had advanced against Babylon before. Babylon had come out to meet him, and then they ran back inside and secured, and nobody was getting into Babylon. Okay? Babylon had two walls that were both 90 feet high. You weren't getting in there. And so Cyrus is like, okay, what do I do? Well, history tells us what he did. He went to gain access into the city by another way. He diverted the waters of the Euphrates River by redirecting the water's flow at the northern side of the city. By digging a canal from the river to a nearby lake, the water diverted. And he was able for his soldiers to march into the city under the city walls through now a shallow portion of what had been a raging river. The Babylonians were completely taken by surprise, and the city fell without a fight this night. Darius the Mede was handed the kingdom by Cyrus, and Darius is at the age of 62. So it's interesting. I never really thought, the Medes and the Persians, I just thought, they're fighting together. Well, yeah, they are in a sense fighting together, but they were family too. And it is Cyrus that's going to be ruling in there, because I think it may be the next, it's Darius is going to appoint all of that, but Cyrus is going to make a appearance in the book of Daniel as well. So that is the lesson.
So when you take water away from people, they can't. That's what Hezekiah did to the Assyrians.
Well, it was just about it. But it was just about it staying shallow enough that they could enter the city, and so yeah. Okay, I think we're done.